Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Sherianna Boyle. And she's here today to share with us her new book, Emotional Detox for Anxiety, 7 Steps to Release Anxiety and Energize Joy. Now, most of you will remember Sherianna. She was on our show just recently, and she's an international emotional detox coach and author of 8 books. She's been featured in over 85 articles and is a renowned presenter to places such as 1440 Multiversity and many more. She's an adjunct psychology professor and a featured expert on Simple Habit app and host of Emotional Detox radio show on healthylife.net. So let's welcome to the show, Sherianna Boyle.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to have you here again and to talk about this book. It's just like everyone I'm talking to has really high levels of anxiety going on right now.
Definitely. Yeah, it feels a little pervasive, doesn't it?
Oh my God, it's crazy. Just crazy how it is right now.
Yeah.
Well, and why don't you share with us your reason for writing this book? Because I mean, your first book was absolutely amazing, and now we've got this book.
Yeah, they're not that much far apart, are they? Well, I wrote the core book, which I call Emotional Detox, which is what we talked about last time, framed out the cleanse, which is the 7 steps for an emotional detox, 7 mindful steps. And I had a lot of questions about anxiety and people wanting to know more about how to implement the cleanse steps into their life. And a lot of these questions came from me traveling around, doing workshops, yoga retreats, things like that. And as they were asking, I was thinking, geez, I could write a whole other book on this because they wanted to go deeper. So emotional detox for anxiety, what it does, it actually reframes anxiety. So I don't see it in the same way that someone else might see it. And then based on that new way of looking at anxiety, that opens up the doorway for, okay, how do I deal with anxiety based on your definition? And that's how the book came to be. Well, let's take this cleanse and let's apply it specifically with this mindset to anxiety.
So I know a lot of people have a different definition of anxiety. So why don't you share with us what your definition is?
So my definition is that anxiety is a sign that an emotion is attempting to be processed, but can't because we won't let it. Because we've learned that emotions were something that we needed to regulate or manage or to prevent. And some people learned that they were meant to be covered up. So when you don't allow an emotion to exist, what happens is the body has a response to that. And it keeps letting you know this very much does exist. And I believe that anxiety is one of the ways that it does that. I mean, think about what anxiety is. It's an acceleration of thoughts. It's physical sensations in the body, tightness and sometimes constriction and increased heart rate and things like that, and worrying about the future and getting hung up in the past or feeling stuck. So it's a lot of things. But what I'm saying is that it is a reaction, anxiety. I don't actually define it as an emotion, to not allowing your emotions to come up to be fully processed. And we know that emotions just don't disappear on their own. They need us to take part in their emotional processing. So even if you had something years ago come up, which we all have, and maybe you were in a classroom somewhere and you got called on, and you weren't prepared, and you felt that fear feeling, that frozen feeling. You might freeze, you might increase your heart rate, your face might get red. And this, you had some anxiety. So you pretend you're fine, you ignore it, you don't really tell anybody about it. Maybe you find ways that to cope with that. And it just keeps coming up in some form or shape or another throughout your life. Your body keeps reminding you it's still there. It's still there. And it's also, there's other things that can happen, of course, along the way. We have all sorts of experiences. And what it is the body's looking to process the emotions that occurred. So it doesn't matter if it was a long time ago or it's happened in the past week or even today. What matters is that you take a moment to process them. And then when you allow yourself to fully process your emotions, what you gain is you gain energy. And as you gain energy in your body and consciousness and awareness, what happens is your thoughts start to create space between them. You get nice space there from the energy, and they transform. You start to see things differently. You have a new perception. So the energy came from processing the emotions fully. And so once you get to that place where you're like, wow, I actually see things a little bit differently. I'm not having a reaction in my body. Then that's very empowering. So that's how I define anxiety. I see it as a reaction to unprocessed emotions.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to break that down for us, because I think a lot of times people go, well, if I have anxiety, I could feel like maybe I'm just, my heart's going a little bit fast. I feel like I've, been chased by a pack of wolves. They don't think about some of the other impacts anxiety has on the body.
Yeah, it's really a memory. It's a memory of some emotions that were never allowed to be processed. And the body is just trying to help you, is trying to actually help you gain energy, because we're spiritual beings first, and we're here for a reason. This is not an accident that we're all here. And we all have value, and we all contribute. And the universe is always going to try to support us on that path. But it can't do that if we don't have energy. So when something happens, and I always say, if it's happening in front of you, it's probably happening inside of you. So, for example, I had a client once that had severe trauma in her life, abusive trauma. And she went to a gym, worked out with a personal trainer, and she walks out of the gym and she sees people in a physical fight, like abusing each other. And she froze because she's like, oh my God, what do I do? And then finally by the grace of God, she did call the police. But she said in our session together, she said, I can't believe that I had to think about it, that it wasn't automatic that I would call the police, that I would actually freeze. And that's an example of what happens with people who have trauma in their life. And these situations are always fascinating to me. Why would she be the one person to walk out of her gym? You know how people go to the gym and have personal trainers, and she's the one that happens to walk out and see this fight. So you could say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened today. That was so awful. And you could get upset about it, and you could get fearful about it. And you could spread it around, and you could say, you're not going to believe what happened. You could go that route, which a lot of people with anxiety do. It's like their nightmare coming true. It's like, see, I told you bad things happen. I told you the world's not safe, right? Or she could look at that situation after she handles it, of course, later on, and she could say, okay, that is a reflection of something in me that is looking to be healed. What I saw was abusive, and that is the universe bringing that right in front of me, saying, you've got some emotions in you around this situation that need to be fully processed. So when you go on an emotional detox, specifically for anxiety, it's about learning to look at situations as happening for you. So I see this situation and I recognize that, and I take some time to say there must be an aspect inside of me that is looking to be healed. Now that's a journey in itself. Sometimes it can be also a sign that you've completed something. You don't really know until you go through the process and you learn. So if I'm extremely triggered, like she went into freeze. She went into a trigger. That's a pattern. That's a memory. However, if I, on the other hand, was able to handle the situation very diligently, very swiftly, very calmly, kind of like what our healthcare workers do. You know, they're on the job, they're swift, they're calm for the most part. And then later on recognize, okay, I handled that. Now I'm going to just take a second just to check in with myself. But if I'm not triggered by it, that's good information as well, meaning I don't take it home with me. I don't wear it. I don't let it skew my view of the world. I don't let it pollute my thoughts. That means that I'm at a place where I've completed a pattern, like, wow, this showed up in my life. I handled it well. I was able to sleep that night. I felt empowered. I felt purposeful. That means that is a sign that that's been completed. So I'm sharing those two scenarios because I want people to know it's not like processing your emotions doesn't mean you're never going to come across something negative again. It's how do you react in that negative situation? What shows up for you? And are you willing to pay attention? And if you go into a state of reactivity, that's anxiety. The more you process your emotions, the more you're going to release the reactions. Your emotions become processed, meaning they run their course fully. They don't get short-circuited. They don't get buried. You allow them to run their course. As that occurs, you gain energy. As you gain energy, you begin to see the world different. You be able to handle yourself differently, other situations, and you don't have to go into those circular cycles where there's judgment, where there's fear, where we're not talking, or maybe we're talking too much, kind of thing. So just giving you a little bit of what that looks like in daily life. And as we raise energy, this is the interesting part, Marianne. As we raise energy in the body, so we're processing our emotions, we become calmer. As we become calm, so the energy goes up, that means calmness increases, thoughts become spaced out. It's not that they don't exist. They're going to exist, but we're not going to follow them like a story. We just notice them. As that occurs, you build safety in the body. And you also bring this sense of safety and security in your atmosphere that you're in. So, for example, for me in our home, there was always a lot of reactivity. I'm going to be honest with you. There was always, before I wrote the core book, Emotional Detox, there was always like this edginess, like walking on eggshells, and don't upset this person, don't upset that person, don't say this, and make sure you don't do that. And there was always that. It never really felt like we could just all just chill together. And we have a family of 5. I have 3 children. It wasn't until I started my emotional detox journey and wrote Emotional Detox, and then the one for anxiety, and started to see anxiety in this way, I started to raise my vibration from allowing myself to process my emotions. And as it occur, I'm becoming calmer. And my children will say to me, "You're a different person. You used to be," that's the language now. you used to be really anxious and nervous. And I'm not saying that I'm a mother. We're all going to at times worry, but it doesn't take over. And I don't even consider it a worry anymore. I consider it guidance, listening to your gut. And so what's happened in our home, as I've become calmer, everybody else is acting better. There's no fighting. There's no bickering. If there is, it's resolved fairly quickly. We are growing from it. There's compassion. And there's also people giving each other space for emotional processing. Meaning, I don't need to go quick anymore. "Oh, are you okay? And I'm so sorry that I said that," or, "Oh, geez," that whole beating a lot of people with anxiety do that. They beat themselves up. They have a reaction. Now they got to go through the cycle of feeling bad about the reaction, feeling guilty, all of this. And all this is emotions just looking to be processed. And it's just all being played out. And instead, it's like, okay, we're just going to provide space for processing and respect that we all might look different. We're not all going to process in the same way. I, of course, have my system that I wrote about and that I adore, but as it is with all families, my family has their own way. But the important part is, because I've gone through these steps and I teach them and I live them, I'm able to see and feel what emotional processing looks like. So I'm able to look at somebody and honor when they're in that space. Because I think sometimes we interrupt other people's processing states.
So in your book, you talk about, the anxiety cycle. And I think a lot of people don't even realize how big a cycle that is. I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, so it usually begins with a trigger. And so people get triggered. And the first thing is you have to begin to identify, well, what does a trigger feel like? And it usually you discover them by your thinking, the types of thoughts, and they ruminate. And with anxiety, we tend to ruminate about the same things over and over and over again, replay conversations, replay situations, or forecast where we think something could go, or what might happen. So there's a lot of what if kind of language. And so if you're saying what if, or worrying about something, then you're in a trigger. And it can also feel like tightness in the body, constriction. And if a trigger goes on long enough, meaning we ignore it, it will change an energy state from being really tight to almost feeling heavy, kind of like depression feels, or blocked. And what can happen is somebody just gets numb, and then they're not feeling anything at all. And you're wondering, how can they say that? How can they do that? When are they going to wake up, kind of thing? And they're just in this, they were in a chronic triggered state, and it's just gotten to a place where now it's become numb. And a lot of people with anxiety have a lot of protection built in, where they protect themselves from the belief that something could hurt them, or something's going to happen, or what if this, that kind of thing. So as those thoughts come in, this can be subconscious, sometimes fearful. And so then they begin to protect themselves from feeling, which sometimes is a coping thing. We put it under the umbrella of coping. And I'm not saying coping isn't the right thing to do, but I say an emotional detox for anxiety, it was never meant to be a long-term solution, because coping is managing. Managing is preventing. So I have to cope with my fear. I have to cope with my overwhelm. I have to cope with feeling out of control. I have to cope with feeling insecure. And so I always say, well, if you have to cope with that, that's like having another job. And anxiety can be like a full-time job. And that means you're burning 3 times as much of energy as somebody else who doesn't have it, and might not even be getting the results that somebody else is getting. Even though you're working so much harder, you might feel like you're getting strained, and then there's consequences for that. So the cycle looks like that, and then the coping and the managing. The tricky part about coping is sometimes you can get a little bit of relief. So I take a little walk. Say, okay, I'm anxious. I got to go outside. I got to take a walk, get a breath. And that can help a little bit. A perfect example is a yoga class. How many people go to a yoga class and they feel good? They feel great. They're in their bodies, and they're moving, and they're breathing, and they're with people, and they feel the calmness. And then they get in their car and they look at their phone and like, crap, I got to go to the store. And oh my gosh, I'm so late now. And now all of a sudden they're back in it again. It's a perfect example of how eventually you have to make a conscious choice to say, I'm going to process the emotions that are coming up. And I'm not saying that yoga doesn't help with that, and I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching for 18 years, but it wasn't until I made that connection in my practice that that's really what it's about. It's not about the pose. It's about listening to my body, that I was able to become more free. Because I was one of those people who go to yoga, I feel great, and I go home and I get annoyed at my kids or something, right? And so eventually you have to take the time to say, this is great that I have this in my life, but I have to check in. And if things are repeating, meaning situations and scenarios, if I always feel like I'm in, oh gosh, I just can't get out of this cycle, whether it's a thought or a belief or a pattern or something in a relationship, these are signs that there are still emotions in there looking to be fully processed. And we need to make that connection and give them permission to fully exist rather than quote unquote manage them.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think a lot of times people look at their anxiety and they're not sure what to do with it. They're just like, well, maybe I drink too much coffee, or I've got too much stress coming in, and maybe I need to manage my stress better. They don't look at it as a practice, like how we were talking about, being in yoga and then coming home and getting a little frustrated with your kids, realizing that, gosh, I need to make some adjustments here so I can take that centeredness with me all throughout my day.
Yeah. So an example of this would be, so you go home. So you do we're just using the example of yoga. Wonderful. You go to yoga. It's so good for you. You go home and now you're irritated. And sometimes people get upset because they're like, darn, I just went to yoga, took all that time and money. What's wrong with me? That's the other thing with people say with anxiety. What's wrong with me? Why? They ask why a lot, right? And so what I would do is I'd look at what just happened with my child, right? I got irritated. Maybe I don't know, maybe they wouldn't get off their phone, right? Or something like that. Or things weren't done around the house that you were hoping that maybe dinner would be started or something like that. And so that's an opportunity. That is a reflection. So when dinner was not started, it made you feel something. So that person, instead of feeling it, reacted in their mind, probably. Oh, figures. No one thinks to start dinner, right? And now they feel overwhelmed. And a lot of times I find people with anxiety don't really ask for support, and where they might judge the kind, and believe me, I was there too, judge the kind of support that they get. But there's a lot of distrust involved. And that's one of the things that I find that gets uncovered, is this feeling like you can't really trust anyone or anything. And that's exhausting because it never really feels like you can just relax and let your shoulders down. And so there's a feeling, that's an opportunity. There was something there. If I'm getting irritated by no dinner is being made, how does that make that person feel would be my question. Frustrated, angry, unsupported, overwhelmed. These are feelings. If we go into reactivity and we just go quickly change and start make dinner and okay, if we go into that mode, we've missed an opportunity to feel something, to process something that happens to be showing up. Now, my guess would be that feeling of feeling overwhelmed or unsupported has been there. It didn't just show up because of dinner. And we want to look at dinner. Oh, it's all, if you just make dinner, if you just do this, then I would feel better. And we focus on those little things when eventually you find out, you know what? It's not about the damn dinner. It's about the fact that there are emotions of overwhelm and feeling unsupported in you that are looking to be healed, processed, and healed.
What a beautiful piece that is, how that all comes together, making those connections, because you can do that throughout your day then, when you're kind of not centered, you're not, you're in a place where it's like, gosh, I need to do some work on myself.
Yeah, well, what's nice about it is there's not a lot of judgment, right? I don't have to create a story to support my upsetness. It doesn't have to be about, well, what you did or did not do is making me feel this way. And that's what children pick up in us, right? They start to feel like, ooh, she's upset or he's upset. Oh, how can I contributed to their upsetness. But what's nice about emotional processing is you see everything as an opportunity. Oh, I got a little ruffled there. I got triggered. Something's coming up in me to be healed. And I'm going to love myself and I'm going to honor myself enough to allow that to happen, to give myself support in a moment. Now, it doesn't have to be, people say, am I going to just walk around and do this all day? No, you can make a mental note to yourself that, especially if you have small children or whatever, you're at work, I'm aware, and I'll say this, I'm aware that I'm triggered. And as soon as I have a moment, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to allow myself a moment to process what came up. Just acknowledging it, and think of it like a little kid that you tell them and you say, okay, later on, I'm going to pick you up and we're going to get an ice cream, right? And you say it and then you never do it. And then the kid says, after a while, they don't believe you, right? They don't trust you. They don't get excited anymore. They don't really pay attention, right? Because, oh yeah, they say that all the time and never happens, right? It's the same thing with your body. So you say to yourself, I'm aware that there's an emotion in me. I just got triggered by that. I'm going to make a mental note of that, or make a little note to myself that I'm going to sit quietly and give myself 5 minutes to process what just came up. And you want to show up for yourself, because that's how we begin to build trust. You want to show up and allow yourself to process the emotion. And then you're going to gain energy. And then the more you do it, the more you're going to learn to trust yourself. You're going to learn to trust your own energy. You're going to learn that you have all the resources. You're going to learn that you processing your emotions gives you far more benefits than expecting other people to make you feel better.
So during this time, we have people who are really having a tough time with being isolated and feeling lonely. Do you think that there's an increase of people going through levels of anxiety right now?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And it really will impact what you pay attention to, what you're drawn to, how long you're drawn to it. I think sometimes it can feel a little bit like a fog. That's the way it's feeling. It's feeling weighted and heavy. I'll give you an example. So I went into a place that I work, which of course now is closed now, and everybody's working from home. And it's a place where they do healing work and things like that. So I went in to pick something up today, and there was one massage therapist there, and she had her mask on, and I hadn't seen her for months now. And I said, "Oh, how are you?" And she said, "Good. How are you?" And then she said, "Did you hear that such and such closed?" And it's a big restaurant in our town. I said, "Really? I didn't hear that. I didn't hear they closed." And so she starts talking about the virus, and that's why they closed, and this and that. It was literally like the second thing out of her mouth after, "Hi, how are you?" And my response was, "Did you hear that there's 0 cases of the coronavirus in the hospital right now?" They released their last case the other day. And her energy just kind of changed. And she said, "No, I didn't know that." And I said, "Yeah, there's no cases in the hospital right now." So it's kind of interesting because, when you get glued to that and you want to pass it on like that, like when she was telling me that the third thing, that tells me that she's really drawn into these conversations. I'm not interested, Marianne. I have to tell you, I'm not interested. I'll take in a little bit, just enough. Sometimes I'll get a little curious. I won't. I won't stay on it very long, because the energy is. It's like a suck. It's like a vacuum suck. You want to get the life force sucked out of you. Watch the news, or look at social media, and and if you feel yourself getting sucked in, this is a sign that it's like being dragged around. It's like being dragged around and just letting your free will be gone. And we all have a free will here of what we choose to pay attention to. So, yes, I think that there's like a vacuum, and it's creating like this tunnel, fearful view. And we all have a choice. However, the choices, I believe, come when we it from emotional processing. The more you process your emotions, the less interested you're going to be in taking part in those conversations, the less fearful you're going to be. And you're going to draw in situations that are more uplifting. I found that information out. Somebody and it came to me and she works right at the hospital. She's on the front line. She's in the ER. And she said, we have none. We just released our last person. I said, you're kidding me. That's wonderful. She said, and let me tell you, not only did we release them, we've gotten so good at the care of these people. We really have learned a lot, and we know how to decrease their level of stay. And I said, that is amazing. I wish they would put that on the news.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just amazing, isn't that, right?
Yeah. So yes, it is. It's heavy. And I think it's like being drugged. That's what it feels like. It's like when we get stuck in it, feels like you're on a drug and you're like, everybody's in the same zone. Right. And what I'm going to tell your listeners is your emotions are more powerful than anything. They are one of the most powerful things I believe about us when they're processed. They will raise you up like nothing else. And I do think that this whole pandemic is about emotional suppression. The fact that we are in this virus and then then we have the George Floyd thing happen. I mean, and we just got slammed, but everything from the emotional detox viewpoint is about emotional suppression, not reaction. Processing. Reacting would be, oh my gosh. Processing is seeing this as, okay, it's time, guys. It's here. It is coming up to be healed. And the thing about emotions is they're timeless. They're timeless and they can cross family lines. And when you choose to process your emotions, you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for your bloodline, the genetic line, you're doing it for the environment, you're doing it for your community. So if you want to get out of the stupor, and that's what it felt like. And I even touched it a few times. I was like, ooh, this can really wear on you. This can really give you this feeling like it can be depressing and impact your thinking and impact your relationships. And you got to really just know that your emotions is far beyond. When I teach yoga, I go take everybody through the emotional detox process. So I teach what I call cleanse yoga. And very often I'll start getting messages and things like that because the energy is so high. That's when we can really connect. And one of the messages I got is we could have been done with this a month ago. Meaning our fear is keeping this, is gripping this virus. It's like we won't let it go. It wants to move on. It really, I heard from Spirit said to me, this could have been over a month ago. The more we process, the more we become calm and it becomes fluid, and then there's flow.
Well, in your book, you talk about, how things are when you clear this reactivity. So what does that look like? Maybe you can give us an example of, what a reactive state is and what it looks like to be cleared of it.
So a reactive state, again, is this fearful thinking and talking, maybe yelling, those kinds of things. Also, withdrawal can be a reactive state, or turning to alternative substances that kind of suppress what you're feeling. anything that can numb a person, alcohol, drugs. Sometimes it's other addictions such as sex or spending money or whatever it is. It's all the same thing. It's about suppressing what's coming up to be healed. What it looks like is you're not triggered. I just was talking to a client this morning, and we were celebrating the fact that there was something that would trigger her. It would bring on those thoughts and the physical anxiety. And she was able to be near a situation and realized it didn't ruffle her. It didn't trigger her. So that's a sign that something's been completed, that she has processed whatever she needed to process around that. It's not that it goes away, and it's not that you don't remember, right? We all have things that have happened in our lives that we'll never forget, right? And nor should we. It's just that we don't get triggered by them. And it doesn't just go away in one full swoop. What happens is the intensity goes down. So some people might even just like avoid a street. Like, oh my gosh, I can't see so-and-so. I cannot go in that direction because what if I run into so-and-so? And then I'll, fear of conflict or fear of, the discomfort. So that is actually how you define a reaction. A reaction is how you make the uncomfortable comfortable. So the person's avoiding the whole street or avoiding the family gathering or avoiding a phone call or avoiding whatever it is, avoidance to be more comfortable. But the challenge is the emotions doesn't touch them. Yeah, it might make you feel better for a little while, but then it comes up again, or it's going to come up through a whole different another situation. Maybe it's not the same situation, but it's the same reflection of the same emotion, fear of conflict. Oh, okay, now I have it coming up here at work. I need to call into work and I need to let them know how I feel about something. Oh no, what am I going to do? What am I doing? And the same behavior comes in. And then it can show up in another area. And so you see how that cycle continues until you allow yourself to feel what's coming up in the emotional detox mindset to be healed. So we have two choices. We can either heal or we can re-traumatize ourselves. And that's the only two choices we have when it comes to an emotional detox. So I can choose the route of healing, which means emotional processing, which means noticing what's happening and realizing that's connected to an emotion or many emotions. We don't even need to know what they are, that are looking to be seen, heard, and validated. They are looking to exist. And when they're allowed to exist, they produce energy. Or I can choose the route of re-traumatizing myself by going into reactivity, which can look like a number of thoughts or behaviors or reactions. And I will rerun that pattern in my body, meaning I will prevent myself from feeling. And that's part of the pattern. Somewhere along the line, I told myself not to let myself feel, that I would be better off not feeling. So it could be, for example, people pleasing. I'm uncomfortable. Let's say I'm a child. My mother's upset. My friend is upset. I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm in a state of reactivity. To make myself comfortable, I people please. When I people please, people kind of like that. Some people do. So maybe I see their behavior change a little bit. Like, oh, I'll do that for you, or you don't have to do, whatever that looks like. They seem like they act a little bit better. So somehow I correlate that as a success. Oh, now when I people please, they act better. So that's how I handle this uncomfortable feeling. So then I become, how do I manage other people's feelings? So a lot of anxiety is not just how are you managing and coping with your own, how are you managing and coping with other people's feelings? And what does that look like? And what kind of reactions are there? And that's what the book really points out for people. So if your listeners are thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much, just know that this is all explained in examples in the book, so you can start to learn how you might be reacting and you didn't see it as a reaction. And again, that's an opportunity. And when my mother was upset or my friend was upset, it made me feel. And there's where you're going to get the healing. It made me feel a certain way. And I'm going to allow myself, even though it happened a bajillion years ago, it's replaying itself in different scenarios. And it's gaining strength by doing that. And then to the point where it might feel overwhelming. So the more you process, it's like you take the strength out of it. The energy, it's not as strong, it's not as pronounced, it's not as present. And all of a sudden you see it, but you're not in it anymore. And that's progress. When I can look at a situation, but I'm not in the middle of the dynamic. I can observe myself and I can observe others through the lens of non-judgment. That's when you know you've mastered processing.
So you talk about gratitude and appreciation in your book. Why is that such an important piece?
Well, those are very high vibrational practices, for one. And I think it's important to, I think so often with anxiety, we want to control what's going on around us, people, situations, a lot of planning, preventing. Again, it's absolutely exhausting. And with gratitude and appreciation, when you really truly learn the skill of that, you learn how to express yourself and your needs and how to voice what's important to you in a way that's not only kind and loving to you, but compassionate and loving to others. And you will find that when we use gratitude and appreciation, people really respond to that far more than focusing on what bothered you or what's driving you nuts. And even if it's in your head, and that's an important thing to know, even if you're not saying it, but you're thinking it, it's still a reaction. So if we're thinking thoughts and we're not sharing how we're feeling, it can be equally destructive. And what it does, it really maintains those anxiety cycles. So once you process your feelings, and I always recommend emotional processing first, then you can go to gratitude and appreciation as a form of communication, a form of asking for your needs to be met or being clear about that. So for example, boundaries, right? If you, let's say somebody called before they came over, or let's say someone let you know where they were going. Maybe there's someone in your life that doesn't really communicate very clearly. So I would always process first. I always say process before you talk about anything. Get the energy, because your conversations will be more authentic and they won't be as reactive. And then I would say, gee, the other day when you called me and you let me know where you were, you reassured me where you were going, or you let me know what time you were going to come home, or you checked in with me and asked me if I needed anything at the store. Here's the key. it made me feel. It made me feel supported. It made me feel loved. It made me feel special. And that's a way that you would show gratitude and appreciation. So really sharing not just, gee, thanks, but how did it make that person, how did it make you feel? And that's really, really helpful to your emotional processing. And it's really helpful to their emotional processing. Because when you say something like that and you put yourself in a feeling state, just like anxiety can be contagious, love is also contagious.
And what a great place to come from. If you're coming from a place of love, I think that that's such a great place. A lot of times people get so kind of caught up in everything that they're feeling, they have a hard time getting to that place of love.
Mm. It can be hard when you're being triggered all the time. I get it.
Isn't that the truth, right? It's like, I might love you later, but not right now, right?
It really can. It'll give you the last thing on your mind. Last thing you want to say is something nice, right? But especially if then you're thinking, oh, why am I going to do that? They've been such a jerk, right? But the thing is like I say, you have to feel your feelings first, and the more you process your own emotions, the more comfortable you'll become with acknowledging, appreciating, and expressing gratitude for others. It won't seem scripted. It'll seem more genuine.
Yes, when you have these authentic this authentic caring about other people, it makes such a huge difference, and people can spot it a mile away if it seems a little phony or you're just saying it, going through the motions.
Yeah, and you can feel it. That's the most important thing. It's not about cheerleading. I know some people, and I even talk about it in the book, will say, look at the bright side. It's a beautiful day. And I always say, even positive Pollyannas can be suppressing their emotions. They've just learned to do it in a very user-friendly way. So no matter what, you have to look at, and that's what the book points out, how am I covering up? How am I repressing or suppressing my emotions? Am I always the first one to say, don't feel that way? Think of the bright side, right? Those kinds of statements are no different than saying, I'm uncomfortable with you feeling that way. And therefore, my reaction is to make myself more comfortable by telling you to look at the bright side. So that, again, it's sneaky. It's sneaky, Marianne. You start to uncover and you're like, wow, I didn't realize I was covering up that way. It's really starting to take the layers off and
kind of peeling those back. Yeah.
Peeling them back and exposing and allowing these emotions to exist.
Oh my goodness, Sherianna. I mean, we can talk all day. I love the times that we've been able to spend together. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about not just this book, but your other books as well?
Sure. They can go to sheriannaboyle.com, sheriannaboyle.com. And then I have my yoga practices are at cleanselife.com if they're interested in that. The books are at sheriannaboyle.com, and then the yoga's at cleanselife.com.
Well, Sherianna, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you, Sherianna. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Emotional Detox for Anxiety: 7 Steps to Release Anxiety and Energize Joy. Emotional Detox for Anxiety is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.